Welcome to the workshop on teaching students to practice. So I hope I'm projecting enough that they're picking up on the webinar. So I'm Heidi Bludau. I'm currently at Monmouth University, but you can reach me at this email, my email address at Gmail, or always find me on LinkedIn. I've accepted a position at a different university that is not social media public yet, so I'm happy to tell you what's going on with that outside of the recorded video. But yeah. I want to thank Elizabeth for reaching out to me to invite me to do this session, and I hope I've put together something that works for everyone. But I'm going to talk specifically about a class that I designed and teach called Applied Anthropology. So if you would like a copy of the syllabus, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share that with anyone. Did he give me He gave me the clicker.
Not working?
I don't need it. Oh, I should probably turn it on.
Oh, there it went.
You got to turn things on, people. All right. So the objectives for the session, as from the abstract, basically, you can read that if you read the abstract. But by the end of today's session, I really hope that you leave with some ideas in your hand of whether it's a syllabus, some ideas. So I've got a guided activity at the end. That I like to spend probably at least the last third, if not half even, kind of like letting people kind of work through, brainstorm, take what I took, ask questions, but I've got some suggestions on how to best use that time. At any point, please ask questions. Of course, it's a workshop, but I'm going to spend the first part, I don't want to say lecturing, but it's an explanation of how I teach and what I teach in the form of a lecture, I think, but I'll have questions, but again, feel free to ask anything, explanatory as we go along. All right, so again, my approach, which is one of many, so I teach Applied Anthropology is the name of the course. We had talked about changing it to Practicing Anthropology because that's really how I was shifting the direction of it, but it was more work than it was worth to change the name of the class due to a new system at the university, and then COVID hit, so we just never bothered with it. But it really does, I take it more into an applied side angle, a more practiced side, if you want to use that continuum, which practicing is on the complete other end with applied in the middle. I also teach my class as a mixed level undergrad course. I consider it much more of a lab type course, or that's what I tell the undergrads, so they're not afraid to take a class with the grad students. And because there's a lot of focus, not necessarily, the literature, as you can see, is only one portion of what we're doing in the course. Now it is required as of students entering in our program at Monmouth in 2020, this class is required for all undergraduate students who are doing I say a straight anthropology major. We have some anthro ed education majors, and they don't have to take it, but it is a requirement as a career development preparation course. I'm in the Department of History and Anthropology, and we have a public history course for the history majors, so we've added that. So career development is really at the core of this course in a lot of different ways, at least the way I designed it. And then we do focus on literature, methods, and practice, and I'll go through each of those individually. There are 7 learning objectives, which are a lot, but I kind of color coded them here to say that there are really 3 areas of the literature, the practice, and the methods, or methods and practice, depending on how you want to, the order of those there. I have taught the career development component of the course as a standalone 1-credit course. So basically, I'm throwing everything and the kitchen sink in this class, and it can be a little daunting at times. And it's a passion project and a pain in my backside often to organize and coordinate. But what the students get out of it, I think, is extremely important. But just saying that you can pick and choose and take and, cobble apart, tear apart whatever you want from anything that I'm sharing with you. Obviously do whatever you want, but there are different pieces I think that could work out separately. when I was designing the course, I did a lot of research, did a lot of Googling of whatever syllabi are available, free, people have out there for everything. And, so I was kind of just reviewing those as I was preparing for this. And, there are a number of classes, syllabi from other universities that they might have a section on career development. They might have a section on methods. What I try to do is incorporate all three of those, and four if you want to increase the career development throughout the entire course in different ways. But just to kind of think about, because I also want students to be able to digest the exercises that we're doing for career development. Just examples of what other universities are doing, at least as of the syllabi I collected in 2012, is that Minnesota State at Moorhead uses their applied course as their capstone course. Of course, UNT has a ton of, their focus is on practicing anthropology, but one of the syllabi I found was primarily a practicum type of course. But there's that. Questions on the general structure? So I want to talk a little bit about what I call the scholarship side of it, the literature side of it. And so, of course, that's reading the scholarly work, primarily to position applied anthropology and the practicing and the academic, again, that continuum, so students understand where do things relate to each other. And because they're really, as was just presented, focusing primarily on the theoretical end of anthropology, right? And they don't get to read the practicing side as much. My title actually is lecturer in applied anthropology. And so I try to bring in practicing and applied examples in every class I teach, but I'm kind of rare, at least in my department, in that way. So these are the three areas that these are kind of like my foundational scholarly areas. What is applied anthropology? For the most part, this is a course for majors. I have had students in other majors take this course. I've had history majors, social work majors, a biology major once, political science major, couple political science majors, maybe a communication major. So I've had a couple, most of them in the other areas of humanities and social sciences. So they can get a little lost at times, but this is also primarily to say your anthro majors, you may have taken theory, you may not have taken theory yet. Some of the students may have taken methods, ethnographic or archaeological methods, some of them haven't. This course, I only teach this course every other fall. And so sometimes depending on where it falls into whether or not they've taken those other ones. I always say once you've taken theory, methods, and applied, you've got your trifecta and you've got the full brunt of what I think you need to leave with. But basically, what is anthropology? What are we doing today? And of course, the ethics, which one of my favorite activities is to look at the codes of ethics from SFAA, AAA, and NAPA, and talk, have the students compare them and see where are the different priorities and so forth, and noting that your stakeholders and so forth are going to be a whole different priority, of course, in these different ones, and we have some good, interesting conversations about that. And then these are the topical areas that I typically teach, and that is a lot, but they don't all get put into every semester. What I'd like to do is say, oh, here are the ones I want to teach. Like since I've learned about and become a convert into business anthropology, I always make sure I include that. Also because students have no clue about this this growing area that they might grow to love. Cultural heritage and museum work, cultural resource management, those are typically always going to be in there because those are the traditional routes. And this is aimed at all. We don't really do linguistic anthropology at Monmouth. It is aimed at all subfields though. So I do ask students, what is your interest? So I'll often do a survey at the beginning to say, here are these other topics. What do you want to do? As a medical anthropologist, I'm often very upset that health is not one of the topics that they want, but I sneak it in. It's like I sneak in their vegetables. And so if we're talking about maybe a policy paper or maybe one of the methods papers, they'll be talking about organizational change in a hospital or something like that. So I sneak in the medical anthropology in different ways. Disaster and environmental anthropology, I always expect that to be more interesting to students, but it hasn't been. But I, again, sneak that in as well because those are areas we know, employ, and know what to do with anthropologists. So this is when students don't know what they need kind of thing. But often there's someone interested in forensics and things like that, which I know little to nothing about, and I still assign readings and we all learn together about that. So I guess that point, you don't need to be an expert on all these because I'm not. And the person that will probably be teaching this course next year is one of our archaeologists. And I was like, he's like, I don't know enough. I said, I don't know about those either. We're all learning it together. So I may have convinced him to take on the course. So trying to balance students' needs for what their interests are, what they want to be learning about is to me important. And making sure I'm not missing out on those student interests. So looking at that list, I know it's not complete. These are the ones that I typically draw on. What are some areas that might be missing? You're like, why don't you have that up there? Or what, are there any other, can you think of other content or topic areas that maybe I don't have up here?
I'm thinking of ancestry.com. Something like something related to DNA and what you can learn about people.
Yeah,
might be of interest to biological.
Right. So the things about our DNA and driven by ancestry.com. Yep.
Education, anthropology, working in the school system.
Why don't I have that up there? I don't know why I don't have education up there. I don't know why, but I actually wrote a course on education and anthropology for our students. So yes.
Working in school systems and also informal, non-formal. It fits in with the museum also.
Yeah, the education. But yes, education has been an area that I don't know why I've missed up there, but it should be up there. But yeah. Yeah.
And I guess community-based research, I mean, it obviously like intersects with
Yeah.
advocacy and so forth. But
I do have that, but it's on my method slide. But yes, we do bring that in. That's okay. And I know some people came in, a few minutes late, but that's no problem. But yes, I do have that in there, but it is on just a different slide. Because these are kind of the content topic areas, but that's one of those interesting ones that it blends community, content and method in that regard. So yeah. Other things that I didn't put on the slide, but I found after I submitted the slides, urban anthropology could be obviously, and law and military could be as well. I really enjoyed the semester. I had a student who was a political science major who wanted to be a law enforcement officer. And he really got a lot out of the course and exercises that we were doing. So I enjoyed that. Anything else? Any other areas that we just to kind of get out there for the group? Communication, yeah. I don't have that on my list, but sure, communication, why not?
I guess science technology studies.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, science technology studies, yeah. Okay, so that's, yes.
Disability.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
Disability.
Yeah. I think I probably, that's under my healthcare and policy umbrella, but yes, disability has a bullet under that. And that could actually go under a couple of other things, right? If you're talking about not just that, but the urban anthropology, how do we design spaces, design anthropology for people with disabilities, right? Yeah. So, right. So I will move on to our next bit. So the methods focus that I have. So what I try to do here are focus on methods that are unique to practicing, that we're not necessarily going to be typically offered in an ethnographic or archaeological methods course. So I also teach our ethnographic methods course, and of course we're doing interviews, participant observation, surveys, focus groups, even some cultural domain stuff. But I bring these, those are the kind of must-haves there, but now let's go into some of these others. And again, I'm not an expert on these. I tell my students, I want you to have an understanding for them. I want you to know that they exist. And, basically let's build our toolbox. You may not be an expert on how to use all the tools in the box, but you need to know that they exist. And one of the textbook I do use is Alexander Irvin's Applied Anthropology Tools and Perspectives in Contemporary Practice. The starred versions, he has lovely chapters that do a good job of explaining those. So needs assessment, social impact assessment, program evaluation. I pull chapters out of that book where he explains them. And then here's your participant action research, or different, whatever form you want to, there's all of its various different types of community practice and so forth. That kind of changes what I choose to teach. Some of it depends on what the students are interested in as well. So what I do for these is all right, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. All the students also do have a small internship placement as part of the class, which is important here because as we learn about each of these methods, they are writing a brief analysis. It could be a hypothetical analysis. Ideally, I would like it to be something that they are based in the organization that they're working in. But basically, how might you do a study in relation, use this method in relationship to yours? Social impact assessment, oftentimes they have to just go completely hypothetical because that oftentimes does not match up with the kinds of internship placements that they have. So I say, okay, they're building, a new exit off the parkway, or Fort Monmouth was decommissioned and they're working and they're currently like trying to figure out, the Army's like figuring out, okay, how can we get commercial space in here? So I tell the students, what happens if they do this, So I kind of give them ideas if they want to, but usually everything else they can find something. So they just kind of write up their own idea. What would they do? Write a reflection on it. So it is hypothetical. I've had on occasion students who have a strong placement, and I'll talk about those in a bit, that they've actually been able to do, like one of my students did a program evaluation at the pre-K care place that she was working, and she'd been working there already, so she was able to use it for her placement. So she had a good relationship that she was able to do that, and she was so excited that like her boss was like, no, this is great, we can actually use this information. And I was like, I want all my students to do that. This doesn't always work out though. I do separately organizational analysis, and I put this separate because that's a separate assignment. So the 1 to 2 page analyses are smaller assignments, whereas the organizational analysis is a stand on its own, because I really want them to do an analysis of the organization that they're placed in. Again, a lot of this is hypothetical. The placements are tricky for the region and all sorts of things. So I don't want to like put a burden on the placements because they've been kind enough to take on the students. So they're not the kind of placements that are ideal. And I'll explain more about that in a second. But basically, having them do, and this is a semester long project, right? The organizational analysis, learning about them. There's a whole list of, there's detailed instructions, of course, about what that would be looking like. What we're doing also learning about them is we're reading in the literature, scholarly research, we are reading then about how organizational analysis was used, how participant action research was used, and so forth. So the students have those examples to draw on as they're moving in. So are there other methods that you think would be useful here, or I should be adding, that anyone could add here that are not listed here, that we might be more unique to, again, practicing? Photo voice, yeah, that's the newer one that I've tried to bring into my ethnographic class, actually, yeah.
Do you talk about quantitative and mixed methods at all?
No, we don't talk about quantitative and mixed in this class so much, mostly because I am really bad at quantitative analysis. So I try not to, but that is me, and that is my personal preference. But I also am trying to get this department to require statistics as the math for our students, because every time I go to a career class or career webinar, I know they've got to have some knowledge of quantitative. They've got to have some knowledge of quantitative. I'm just really bad at stats.
I think even if they can't do it themselves,
Yes.
it's good to be able to say like, that statistic doesn't mean what you're saying it means.
Yep.
Or that was not the right test to use. You can't take means of Likert scales.
Right.
Even just on that level.
Right, I do, yeah, so bringing quantitative here would be great. I try to bring it in a little bit to the ethnographic class I teach, but that's me teaching the whole gamut of things, so. Yeah. GIS, yeah. We have full courses we have a GIS program, so I let them do that there. And a lot of our students actually take that as a class, but yes, GIS, if you don't have those opportunities, introducing the GIS would definitely be, yeah, I encourage all of my students to take it because it's a line on their resume that actually could get them employed, just even if they've had an intro level class. So, yeah.
What is the photo voice that you just mentioned that I'm not familiar with that?
Photo voice, do you want to explain more? Because you probably know more than I do. I'm just barely introduced to it if you brought it up.
Well, this is basically, it's like a sort of action research crime that use, photos to address a problem and then, working through the
Yeah. So to summarize for the webinar. It's the using visuals and photos as part of participant action research. And it's, like I said, I've read a few articles about it, but it's in my passive knowledge right now. So, yeah.
I have a different question that's not about something like this in terms of methods, but
Okay.
I'm curious about how you develop your placement.
That's the next slide.
Oh.
So hold your thought. We'll get to it. I was jumping ahead, but that is definitely in the next slide. And I will talk about that headache in a moment. Yeah, Elizabeth.
One thing that I use a lot is free list. And that's super easy.
Yeah, free listing. Again, great here. I use that. I teach that in ethnographic methods, but yeah, so I do teach it just in a different class. But again, that doesn't mean that, again, not all my students take both classes either.
Yeah.
So, but free listing is yeah.
I have one other thing, which is a technique I've been using a lot now, where you ask people to draw a picture and then explain what they've drawn. And it's so cool because you get more information. Well, actually, it's a 3-step process. So first you say, tell me about interaction in your work or whatever it is. Now draw me a picture of what that looks like. And now tell me what you've drawn. And I'm telling you, the data you get is magnificent.
Yeah. So asking
It's
people
magnificent. I'm not kidding.
to draw a picture, tell me what they draw and explain why they drew it, right?
Each
So,
time you get more information from them.
Yep.
I published an article in the Annals of Anthropological Practice. So you can find out more about the method there. It was like, maybe it was last year, 2020. I can't remember, but.
I guess another thing that occurs to me, it's not quite anthropology, but it's like a next door neighbor, is some of the human-centered design methods that people use.
yeah, human-centered, I actually have this in my notes, the human-centered design methods. So user experience, even market analysis could be, again, brought in here.
And also like meeting facilitation. It's like focus group, but it's not focus group, it's structured differently.
Meeting facilitation, good.
And a lot of the human-centered, like the training that I had on that, they said basically, the reason that we walk you through all of these ridiculous exercises with Post-it notes and Sharpies is not about that, but it's about the conversation that we have while we're doing it.
Right. So it's about the conversation, again, repeating for the conversations that are having during these exercises. In the back, you had your hand raised. Yeah.
Oh, I just have a question about, I don't know if other people have encountered, people calling design anthropology, just really anything, but it doesn't, or like, design ethnography.
Yeah.
Very often that's like, anything that involves some sort of conversation, but not necessarily involves ethnographic methods. So I've been I had an experience where I was part of a workshop where there was design ethnography, but there was actually nobody who had a background in anthropology or sort of knew what ethnography was. And it was kind of I don't know, is that
Right.
something I'm just raising that as a.
Right. I haven't had that issue here. The idea of design ethnography, anything goes. I mean, with not being ethnography, I have had conversations since grad school about ethnography. A lot of people using the term ethnography and not doing ethnography, right? They just like the term, and whether it's in different disciplines or I think across business, I was probably down in the auditorium a couple of years ago at the business conference talking about how the word ethnography is tossed around a lot, but people don't understand that they're maybe not doing it. So that's another, but yeah.
There's a great paper in the EPIC proceedings from like 15 years ago about precisely that.
Oh, okay.
Where the keyword is de-skilling.
Yes.
This is coming out, I'm Dr. Appleton, this is coming out of UK as well as the West Coast, but I'm going to call it methods of research into the unconscious. It's kind of a crossover with psychology, and it connects with Elizabeth and this person who's speaking about voice, but actually looking not just for the explicit, but for the implicit, more archetypal or symbolic or darker areas that actually are the big obstacles within some organizations and some research methods.
Right. So you said research into the unconscious?
Yeah, methods of research into the unconscious.
Methods of research into the unconscious. Great.
Yeah.
So, and as I said earlier, we're throwing a lot of stuff out. You got to figure out what you have time and knowledge and energy and what your focuses are, but that's part of the exercise I'll ask you guys to have you guys do as part of the workshopping. And then the practice, since we have that lovely segue there. So I do practice through 2 ways. Like I said, there's a placement requirement. Like many universities, we have an experiential education requirement at Monmouth. And so our undergraduate students taking the course are often using this course to fulfill that. The graduate students who are taking it, or students who have already filled it another way, I can be looser on their placements. The students who are using it to check off that requirement, I have to follow those requirements. Placements are tricky because I only require when placements are required as part of a course in addition to academic work, we typically only require them about 20 to 30 hours per semester. They really can't do more than that. So it's oftentimes hard to find a place that's willing to commit to a student for such a short time. That's why I say I don't want to burden them. So sometimes students end up with places they've found or they've already got an internship lined up, and they are doing more hours. Sometimes, like I said, if a student is a student I was talking about who worked at the pre-K, she'd already fulfilled her requirement with another class. So I was like, great, use it. I've had, if you're a grad student working at Starbucks on the side as a barista, great, use that. Because, I just have to make sure I fulfill certain requirements, but I want the purpose of the placement is to have the students in an organization that they can use to think through these methods. Mm-hmm. I would love to have been able to have a client or something like that. It's just not, there's a lot of, so I'm at Monmouth University, for those of you who walked in after my introduction, and we are down the shore, and it's just a lot of small communities, and it's just kind of a hodgepodge of still trying to make those connections with the community. And I think there's a lot of us from the university trying to go out into the community. So they're a little oversaturated at times, and then there's a lot of untapped stuff as well. So those placements are a little tricky. I start reaching out with students in August to say, what are you interested in? What kind of placements? So I can start getting them going when classes start in September. But when I taught the class fall of 2020 virtually, a couple of students had in-person placements. Most students had virtual placements. The university was even looser on those requirements because we had to be, and this was a graduation requirement. I had a couple of students who didn't have a placement until late November. Or late October. Luckily, there's still time to get to 20 hours in, but she struggled with being able to do the other work in the course, those kinds of methods and so forth. She didn't have anything to ground them in, so she was working hypothetically throughout most of the semester. And I'm happy to. Does that answer the question about placements? Okay. And then I bring in guest speaker. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask whether or not you've ever done this. Where you have the sort of as a class,
yeah,
you work with an entity or
I have not been able to. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to find that. We actually have a statistics class that does that, or not an entire entity. But when I taught a graduate seminar in business anthropology, I reached out to our librarian on campus, and we did have the library as a client, and we had the students doing some market analysis for them, and we had them do user experience. And so he came up with about 4 or 5 projects for them to do. So they weren't working in small groups. Yeah. So I know my goal was in the future to really kind of, for the business anthropology class, I was hoping to design to do that client base that way. There's too many, I think, with one of the goals of this class is the way I approach it is to get students need to get out of it what they need to get out of it for their future career. So I really want them to be working in areas that align with their interest if possible. So that's another reason I've also kind of shied away from the one client, but that is definitely a good model and an easier model if you have that access to a client with that, so there's lots of different ways for it to get the student that experience. Then like I said, guest speakers, bringing in guest speakers. I was at one of the department representative breakfasts at the AAA's a number of years ago, and they're talking about how, I think it was Memphis, and how they've got a really robust program about bringing their alumni back, and just kind of got me going. I need to bring in more guest speakers, and I've been doing that. So the last time I taught it, we're on Zoom, so it's also super easy to bring people in on Zoom. It was even better. And so I was able to bring in about 5 or so speakers. I had another alumni who works at FEMA, and she was just swamped. It was the end of hurricane season, and that's her area of specialty. But most of the people I did bring in were alums. I wanted to also bring in grad and people who only have an undergrad degree as well. I'd say only, but that's important to know that, look, they're out there working in good jobs
Right.
with a bachelor's. So pick someone from PR. I had some students doing alums doing data analysis. One of our well-known archaeologists who hires like half his firm is alumni from our program, or adjuncting for us. And then a good friend of mine who actually works at the Smithsonian. She's worked at the American Indian Museum, the Navy Archives, and now is at the Hirshhorn. So she's always happy to tell bad stories about me to my students, but or offer to tell bad stories about me to her students. But but they're always like, "Ooh, Smithsonian," that they perk up at that one, of course. So getting that experience, and that is really tell us about, sometimes they bring a presentation, sometimes they don't. It depends on how what they've got, if they have something prepared, if they want to prepare something. So I wanted to bring in more. I would have loved to bring in someone almost every week, but just couldn't get that together. But again, with Zoom, even easier to bring people in. What I do for the assignments portion here is then I have them do a practitioner profile, which I know I got that idea from someone else's syllabus. And there's a couple of issues of, I think, practicing anthropology and another that have and then there's a website with a number of business anthropologists that have a lot of profiles on it. And so I have the students kind of research individuals and write up a profile about them. That one is kind of all of these, I would get rid of that one because I think it's kind of lost its purpose to me. If you're there's just too many things the students are doing. Informational interview, I'd almost say if there's one thing you have to do, I would say you have to do that assignment. That is one of the most powerful and useful assignments the students can do. And sometimes they're reaching out. Sometimes they struggle to find someone. I had someone cold call the CDC one time and she got someone to do an interview with her. And this was someone who never talks in class. So I was shocked, but thought it was amazing. So, I think the informational interview, and I've brought in our career services to come in and do a presentation on how to do informational interviews to get someone else to talk at them a bit. I've also had them come in to talk about how to use LinkedIn. And so I've also been having them do a LinkedIn profile. And a placement summary was just basically summarize in a page or two, what did you get out of your placement? They have to keep a journal and a time log. And I'm just kind of did you do it? But the placement summary is now tell us what you actually learned out of it. I found that once I added that in addition to the journal was a lot better than having them just do a journal because I need to process at the end of the semester. Yes.
Could you say something about the time commitment for students in terms of the placement?
Right, so the placement is about 20 hours, sometimes up to 30, but just because they're doing a full class, this is the 3-credit course. And so it's really, I even let them out of class early a lot of times to say, you're out there doing placement hours as well. So, and that's typical for the courses that we teach that are experiential education as a course. If you're doing all the academic work in addition to that experience, usually it's a limited experience. So.
Yeah. Is it placement? I mean, you said it was a requirement. At our university, it's not a requirement for the placement. Are you identifying the places? Is that something somebody else? How are you getting this network of
Right.
places?
I have a network. I have a list of places that I've reached out to. I even have a little description say, hey, would you like an anthropology intern? Here's what they can do for you. And of course, as always, when I am the one that's yes, we'd love a student, none of the students are interested in that one, right? So I'm a couple of places have set up interns. We have an environmental organization that has a set internship that I've got a relationship with that I often try to send students there. But sometimes students go themselves, especially if they're looking for something outside of what I've already kind of been able to connect with. And I'm go to the Career Center, see what they have. Our university, though, is also shifting its experiential education framing, and they're also shifting potentially the internship policies and so forth. So right now we've been really loose on things. They might be getting a little more, and even the state in New Jersey is not cracking down. They want more information on when students are working in government organizations and agencies that have that tracked a bit more. And this is why I start in August for September, fall class, because, I want to get things going, but if the students don't respond and let me know, it's working, it's hurting cats over here. And then I saw here.
Sorry, do you typically tailor, because you have all different kinds of organizations that you might be sending students into? do you tailor your message about here's what students could do for each
Right.
organization? Or do you have like a boilerplate, and would you be willing to share
Right.
that with us?
So I don't tailor, I don't tailor to those organizations. I do have more of a boilerplate. So if you email me, I will put my intro slide back up at the end for those who walked in after that. Yeah, so I do have a kind of boilerplate, the kind of general thing. And I've sent it out to a labor organization that works with mostly undocumented laborers. I've sent it out to one of our LGBTQ plus organizations. A lot of the nonprofits are what I'm sending it out to them in that regard. I haven't really been reaching out to for-profit organizations in that regard. So, but yes, please, I'm happy to share anything I'm talking about. Yes.
If students and their placements have total agency, what trends are you noticing? Just very broad trends. Are you noticing that students, that graduate students or students, master's, PhD, are getting very interested in? Very broad. If they can go to any place, where are they pulled and attracted to?
So where are students attracted to? These are undergrad and masters, just to clarify that, but that, that's hard. And I can draw it, not just, so I've only taught this class a handful of times because since I teach it every other year, but I'm also the career advisor. So any of our students who want internships, they come to me as well. Right. I don't see a trend because I think the problem is they don't know. And I'm out there, I'm this disciple of work outside the traditional areas. If you don't want to work in the traditional areas, you want to work in heritage, great, I'll help you find a spot. But if you don't know what you want to do, let's talk about all these other things. I have, maybe because I've been preaching it so much, seen a little bit more of students going into the business area. But I'd say where our students have found employment have been outside of the traditional areas, have been in data analysis. Whether I've got one student, my grad student, she did her thesis on medical anthropology issues, and she is working for Robert Wood Johnson. Another student fell in love with food insecurity issues, worked for our local food bank for a couple of years, and now she's doing data analysis somewhere else. But she did hone her skills a little bit working at the food bank. And this is a food bank that manages like 12 million pounds of food every year kind of thing. So it's a big organization. But yeah, so I don't really have, our students are kind of lost, and unfortunately they tend to come to me. If I don't have them in their first year or two, they come to me when they're, I need to graduate, I need to complete this requirement. Even though I email them and I email, so I do the outreach, but I don't always get the response. So.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about communication lately, and I'm wondering, websites, like the department website, is it prominent that, we do internships, or we do this, or we do that? I mean, so I'm just putting in a suggestion that might be a way. If students go to the website and they see right off the bat, wow, I can do this.
Yeah, so department websites focusing, and in fact, I wear a lot of hats in our department. I am the content manager for our department website, and I've spent the last 2 years redeveloping it, and it's going to go live this summer. But I had one of my grad students from business anthropology class do user experience. She tapped her brother and a bunch of his friends to go through our website and figure out what's wrong with it and make it better. And one of it was, we're going to put career development as one of our main, that was the plan. They've kind of changed things up on me. But yeah, the plan is to have career development on the front page, because our department also has shifted to require it for all students. And I think that was an important thing as well, to say we are requiring for history and anthropology majors, you must take a career development course. Unfortunately, we're not getting that word out as we actually advertise enough, but websites, department websites, I think is key there. I am cognizant of the time, so I want to move on, and so that we get to the working part of it. So just to kind of talk about the career development side of it. So I really like, and this book is also out on the table, but I happen to have brought my copy. I like Riller and Goldmacher's Designing an Anthropology Career. The book came out September of 2020, so I have not taught it as part of the class. I used the first edition. The second edition came out in 2020, so I used the first edition the last time I taught it. But I just used this as an independent study with 1 credit for 1 student. And I like what they did of shifting 2 of what used to be regular exercises into larger projects, which is a secondary field paper and a portfolio project. So those are now kind of enhanced versions of the regular exercises. But I do encourage you to take a look at it. I get no money from it, but it's one of my favorites. Sherry, if you're on. I find what I like about it is that, I like brought my notes down. So they pack a lot of bang for the buck, and the students are doing exercises that really, they get a lot out of. I've done probably a one credit course using just the book alone as a career development for students as an independent study, probably 10, 12 times. And the students always end saying, thank you, because they actually know how to talk about what they want. They know what they want to do and they know how to talk about it. Now, there are other ways of doing it. So some other suggested books, Anthropology Graduate's Guide, Anthropology in Practice by Ryle, Careers in Anthropology, a couple of other books that I'm familiar with. I have used this book with other majors. Again, as I said, who've taken the class, and it's worked beautifully with them. It does not, it's tailored to anthropology majors, but it also works well with other majors as well. And I think it's what I like is that there's these little exercises that you do, and they do basically one a week for the full semester. And at the end, they've got this idea of who they are, who they want to be as a professional, and how to talk about themselves as a professional, and a portfolio at the end. So, I've toyed with the idea of this. I just did it with a student as a one credit this semester, and we used her LinkedIn profile as her portfolio. That may or may not be the best way to do it. I've had, so there's different ways of doing that. But I also say, I would also say having the LinkedIn profile, at least until LinkedIn is not the thing we're using and we're doing something else. But, having students do that as well, and have it as a graded project, because that way it's done well, has been another one of the key important things. So I think we've kind of answered a lot of this already of the what else, because you guys have been throwing some great questions out. So I'm again looking at the time. I want to get to what I'd like to ask, but you might be asking, we haven't said about elevator pitch. It's in there, but it's in the work. It's in the book. It's one of the exercises in the book. So there are a lot of the things that you may not have seen are in the book. So they're in there. I just didn't spell them out. Yes, sir.
I missed something. Did you say you use this book as a textbook for the class? Or
Yeah.
just for your own?
No, it's the only assigned book for the class. Everything else are just articles and so forth. But I do require them to get it and use it.
Is there an elevator pitch for parents who don't want their children to major?
There you go. Talk to Elizabeth about that one. I'm sure we can develop one. Yeah. So yeah, my dad finally is okay with me being an anthropologist, I think. So, but I think it's about those things of saying, what jobs can you get, for the parents, right? Yeah.
I actually think, jesting aside, just that's incredibly important.
Yep.
Just gone to just been a representative for our department at a new students thing where they're picking majors.
Yep.
And it's just like, they're either the students tell you like, I'd like to do this, but my parents won't let me, which actually we've run into on numerous occasions, or the parents are like, no matter what you say, I'm convinced, because it's not a word that is familiar in the way that other things are comfortingly familiar.
Yeah.
Like psychology.
Right. And I personally do the same thing. I use the pitch that this is like any other solid liberal arts degree, and you get all these different skills, and we don't know what's out there. And I also use the fact that you've got people like Mark Cuban saying we need liberal arts degrees out there, like history and anthropology, even though he says like English and foreign languages, because the robots are going to do the work, but we need people who can think, so, that's what I try to like use those kinds of people who's in our driving industry to say, we actually need humans who know how to deal with humans. But yes, how to get the parents to get on board is a departmental issue. I mean, I think we need to figure that out.
I think that's something the commission could take on, actually. I think it's a really important point. And maybe with our combined brain power and with a few test parents, we could take something on.
Right. Yeah. So having the commission work on
Yeah.
the elevator pitch for the parents.
And career and advisors, because before in
Oh, yeah.
university, they don't come to us as majors and
Yes.
gone through advisement,
Right.
because those people don't know what anthropology is.
Right.
They're like, oh, well, you want to do sociology.
Right.
And so they never even end up.
Well, how to get to the advisors, I actually pitched, we do first year advising, so students get a pool, and I actually did a pitch to first year advising one time, those advisors about what anthropology was.
Right.
So, trying to reach out to those people who are, there's a lot of legwork out there,
Yeah.
right? It's because we're not all, Indiana Jones. No, we're Jillian Tets, right? I mean, so,
If it would help, I have a one-page report on American community survey data of what jobs people actually get after they get a BA in anthropology.
All right, so looking at the time, I said, so about 50, I wanted to, well, Elizabeth asked me to make sure you guys had a chance to actually workshop something. So I want you guys to walk away with something in your hand at least, or in your notes or wherever you're taking things. So here are my suggestions on how to be, how to take this information. As I tell my students, talk to your neighbors. Raise your hand. I'm happy to throw, come around, and if you have any questions that you specifically want me to ask, but, how are you defining the anthropology you're teaching? So how do you want to be talking about, if you're designing a syllabus for a course like this, what do you want to talk about anthropology? What does it mean to talk about practicing and applied anthropology, right? What are your main objectives? So I had 7, but what are your kind of like 3 to 5 things you want students to walk away with being able to do at the end of the semester, right? Key areas of content, right? Methods of instruction. So I use a combo of lecture, a little bit of lecture, mostly seminar and practicum, a little bit of everything. But do you have are you aiming this at, the course I teach is at, graduate master's level, but it's also at the undergrad, it's a 300, so a junior level course. We typically ask students to take it their junior or senior year, since I teach it every other year. So I did have a sophomore taking it once because she was graduating a year early. But she was one of the better students in that course. But thinking about that, of course, you really can't design a course unless you think about your modality anyway, right? And then what's the one thing you believe you must do in this course, regardless of everything else? So if you're like, what do you definitely want to make sure that you have them do? You can have more than one, but this is my recommendation of what you kind of work on as I kind of let you go. I'm going to put up a couple other slides though, and I'll cycle back to the intro slide, just for those of you who stepped in after that. But I'll leave this up for a bit. The next slide, we'll show you, I'll come back. A list of other texts, again, it's a sampling, and I actually have additional books that there was literally like Tuesday, I think, something came across AAA Communities about, actually I have it on this slide, the one I printed. Terry Redding and Charles Chaney's Profiles of Anthropology Praxis. So that, it came out through Communities, and so I was like, added it here. I forgot it. I sent my slides in. And then I put on the table a book that I found on my bookshelf by Basala and Debelius. So what are you going to do with that? And Ryle was like, oh, that's a great book. So he actually mentioned a couple of others. So if you go down to the commissions table, he might have some other suggestions. That one's more general for you're getting a liberal arts degree. What are you going to do with it outside of academia? But those are some good resources. So again, I'm happy to share any of this, but I'm going to put this back up to let you guys do the working part of the workshop. So. Or talk amongst ourselves, whatever you want. No, just, however, I don't know. Talk to each other, work on your own, whatever you want to do.
They're, you know, very back to them. You know, basically getting access to the decorators done. Oh, I actually do. And I have to do all these stuff. And I am sad, and I know it's like, you know, kind of thing, getting them to kind of like, right.
And so I have to tell you, so deep, it feels like more than- And so it's like. I mean, so I think too, right, that's still like, you know, I just think it's something that I agree. It's like
Oh my God. Abilities they have, like what they're able
Bringing it back. We are
And the other one is to about, so don't say. Don't say.
So I'm putting up my contact information again in case anyone joined late and did not get my name and email address. But we will be ending this in just a moment.
Presents its own community and your presentation, we can also like a flow of resumes, you know, like public speaking experience, and super fast. And so students, what was so exciting about it is coming out and you know, so they know that before they come, first of all, our biggest event, really, very they did project that was close to the video game to map the breakdowns because she worked in Trader Joe's. She didn't get enough knowledge of the way. Yeah. Like they were different, there were small. Yeah. Emotional. It's like the combination, like kind of. That's what really of course, reading research on this topic, but the notion Right, because they already have the major. Some people are like, it's really the parents that are. Yeah. This is to build a network. So, let me get up here so they can. So I guess what I wanted to do is kind of close out and just say, was there anything that you're like, we had this great aha moment we want to share with the group, the class, I was going to say, that came out of your conversations, or any like burning, I'm happy to continue answering any kinds of questions, of course, throughout the day. But is there anything that you guys were like, we had this great idea we want to share with the group? Or anything? Yeah.
I want to suggest maybe, that might be something that the commission might take on. I think globally it might be really helpful to just have a survey from a lot of employers. You know, I know personally that people in the professional world respect and value anthropological skills, not necessarily anthropological, but really very much the kind of skill building that happens in departments. And I feel like it might help parents to know that, to kind of either have a large survey around different even kind of sectors.
Yeah.
For professionals to say, what kind of students, what kind of backgrounds have done the best in these kind of spaces. And I would be willing to bet a lot.
Yeah.
Times employers will say we need communication skills, we need critical skills, we need students to be able to write coherently, all these things that a biological program offers in spades.
Well, thinking about those kinds of skills, actually, what I started doing, a lot of my 200 and 300 level courses are being like my topics courses like food and culture and things are taken by students outside of anthropology to fulfill a different requirement.
Yeah.
I started putting out a 2019 LinkedIn report of soft skills that employers want. And I would put that in the syllabus and go, here's what you're going to get. These are some of the skills you're going to get in this class that employers want. Because I also wanted my non-majors to go like, why am I taking this course just to check off? It's like, no, you're actually getting useful stuff out of it, you know?
Can you share the report?
Shoot me an email. I'd be happy. Now, the report, I don't know if I still have the report, if I'm perfectly honest. I have my list on my syllabus that I recycle. But if I have it, it might be in my resources file, but so.
Or just put this on the.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
I think for my whole group, one of the things that came out is that we need to have, updated training on some of the new methodologies.
Yeah. Updated training on new methodologies. As I've been oftentimes heard, we're always learning and we're always learning, and people are constantly going to new workshops. I did some workshops on rapid ethnography a year ago. They were based in the UK, so I was on my computer at 5 a.m. a couple of Fridays in a row. And they were great, and I need to learn more about it. But I was like, that's the tool that I really want to learn more about. So yeah.
Just to build on that, yeah, because we're talking about the fact that for those of us trained in academic more, non-applied, we can read the other things, but
Yeah.
we still shaky teaching methodologies that we have not been trained on. So something like a 3-hour seminar on how to teach needs assessment,
Yeah.
we're not actually doing it ourselves, but we're teaching it.
Yes.
So we need to know how to teach that.
Yeah, I teach it without I've never done one.
Right.
Right.
I'll admit it, but I mean, I don't tell the students, I tell the students that I don't lie to them, but we're all, again, learning together. But yes, those kinds of things would be great for future webinar series. Looking at you too. Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'll just give the 4 C's here that our group discussed. C for collaboration with non-anthropologists, how new students can come in.
I'm going to repeat just in case anyone's here.
Collaboration. The next was consciousness, allowing students to find out what it is they know consciously that they can bring. 3 is contemporization of the language. So instead of participant observation, for instance, contextual inquiry. We also spoke about emotional labor. And then finally, C-suite. Not only working in the area of the barista at Starbucks, but going all the way to the top and including now these new forms of organizational processes that the anthropologists.
Right. So it was collaboration, consciousness of what students understand. What was the third C?
Contemporization.
Contemporization
C-suite.
and C-suite. Well, again, C-suite's another word I learned in this building a couple of years ago. I was like, what is? Oh, that's what it means. Got it. I had to interpret. Yeah. Yes.
I was gonna ask what it was.
Corporate suites, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and it's about, and whether or not you teach this in applied or somewhere else, but you're teaching students how to speak the jargon of those other disciplines, right? That they were going into. So, but again, feel free, LinkedIn, my name at Gmail, either way, find me. I'm happy to chat with you. I'll be happy to chat with you all day. I have business cards if you can, and just know that as long as you can just first my name at Gmail, that works too. I don't have my new email yet, so I can't share that. But thank you guys so much. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. That was